if you're Caleb Williams, you're already getting shit talked about you, and yet you're still being talked about being the number 1 overall pick. Why? Why do the combine?
But at the end of the day, the number one question you want answered when you draft anybody in any position is, do they love football?
All right, let's move on. Talking about franchise players, let's talk about some future franchise player, because the NFL Combine has begun this week, Monday, but there are going to be some very notable college football players that are not going to be, participating in the NFL Combine.
Boo, Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, I was going to say the 3 biggest ones, right? Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Marvin Harrison Jr. I feel like, Kyle, like you and I have had this conversation before. These guys are predicted top 5 picks. Like, they've been predicted top 5 picks in almost every mock draft. Maybe give or take Jayden Daniels. Maybe Jayden Daniels has fallen outside of the top 5 ever since the end of the college season. But Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. have for sure been there. So now comes the question, do these guys even need to do the combine? Because they're going to have their workouts at their respective colleges, I think mid to late March. And I don't even think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to do one. I think he's just preparing to get drafted and preparing for his rookie year. But Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams are going to have their practices mid to late March. So, like, the NFL Combine is usually like where you go to see these like future rookies, have these workouts where you're just like, fuck, he's going to be good, this and that. But you have your guys like Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels and Marvin Harrison Jr. that don't need to do that. So I guess my question to you is, do players like this need to do the combine?
Yeah. So look at Anthony Richardson. Imagine if he was like, I'm not doing the combine. He would not have been drafted at, what was it, 3, 4,
yeah.
3? I think with the Colts, higher than anybody thought that he would have gone.
Yeah, Ginger Nose.
It was his combine. I remember they were like stories that just kept getting leaked. Like he did some training in Jacksonville, outside of Ponte Vedra. I lived there for a little bit, and that's probably about 2 hours south of Gainesville, or north of Gainesville. Fourth. So you look at, I mean, the headlines were like, this guy's an alien. Look at his broad jump with his 40 and all this stuff. Like, if we can build his mind around his athletic skills, oh my God, could you imagine what this guy could do? And then we got a sneak peek at him, and it was like, wow, yeah, there's something there. I saw it in the preseason. And that is what the combine's all about. It's about showcasing your athletic abilities. And I said it last year, I'll say it every year. If a player is, I guess, prospected to go in the top 5 and he decides that he doesn't have to throw balls because his value could only go down, then I think as an owner, it's like, okay, well, there's 2 things. One, we want to make sure that our evaluation of you is consistent with everybody else's. And we do that by watching. And another thing is, what really are you afraid of, right? Like, if you are not afraid of your value getting knocked down, then why wouldn't you go out and throw passes? And it's kind of, to me, like, oh, a player that's not willing to bet on themselves, just want to take advantage that they're already, this highly wanted. Hey, let's not do anything to mess that up. It's kind of like if you go out driving drunk for 2 hours, and then you get to your house, and then you're like, you know what? I'm going to go stop at the gas station. It's like, no. You already made it home. Don't go back out there. Is that how the agents are talking to these players? Like, no. Right now, you're a number 1 overall pick. Do not throw. don't do anything. Just stay inside your bedroom for the next 4 months. Don't go anywhere. Don't party. Don't. And I get all of that other stuff. But when you say don't work out, it's like, okay, so is it the agents as well that don't believe? Because at somewhere along the lines, I understand that it's a business decision, but it's really hard to sell me that it's anything other than players not wanting to screw up where their value is already standing, which tells me that there is some kind of concern that they're going to do that, or it wouldn't be a valid concern. I mean, if they had all the confidence in the world, they'd be like, look, I'm just going to show them real quick why I'm going to be drafted where I'm going to be drafted.
Right.
You know, it's like, no, we're not going to show up. I don't know. I've never liked it. If I was an owner, I wouldn't like it, but it's part of the deal. It can't be, you don't like it so much that you're going to rule out any player that's doing that. You can't do that because you would be wrong, but it's still something that wouldn't sit well with me. It's not like, oh, awesome, this guy's not going to work out. But yeah, you don't want to be one of those guys that's like, I'm not drafting anybody that doesn't work out at the combine either.
Yeah, and I could see your side of it. The thing is, I disagree, because you just had an entire college season worth of tape for these guys to evaluate. And if we're already saying that these guys
looked awful last season.
Right, but he didn't look awful last season. There's
bad.
no way he's the number one pick and looked awful. There's absolutely zero way.
Watch the Notre Dame tape. I think he
that
threw like
one game.
In the,
one
no,
game. He won the Heisman 2 years ago. He won the Heisman 2 years ago.
We just haven't seen a quarterback so highly recruited that hasn't gone to the playoffs, didn't even go to the playoffs. This whole plan of leaving Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley was supposedly, oh, we have the best quarterback in the country. We're definitely going to be in the college playoffs. They couldn't even make a Pac-12. They couldn't make a bowl game. They lost and lost and lost. And at the end of the day, like, Mahomes did that too in Texas Tech. But at the same point, like, Texas Tech didn't go to the playoffs, and Mahomes wasn't the number one overall pick for a reason.
So you are saying that because of his recent performance, he's awful, which is exactly why these fucking guys don't want to.
I don't see what's so special about him.
What I'm saying is, because of his recent performance, you're saying that he is not what you expect to be a number one pick, or why the hype around him is so big, which is one of the exact reasons why you don't want to do the combine. If you do look bad, which Caleb Williams looked bad this season, you know, in quotations from certain people and from other people, he's fine. He's going to be the number one pick. Will you go to the combine to continue to prove these people right? Or will you say, you know what? I am expected to be the number one pick. Why would I do it if I know when I go to USC to do my
pro day?
Is that what it's called? Pro day, right? Pro day with a system, a group of people that already know what I'm going to do. The hell do I need to do the combine for? I'm going to be the number one pick, supposedly. The only thing I can see being a negative impact in terms of not doing the combine, if you're one of these top 5 guys, is exactly to your point, Anthony Richardson. If he had not done the combine, he probably would have been picked 2nd round, 3rd round. The Colts may have not been able to see his tape at the combine, or, you know, in real time, and been like, that's our quarterback. That's the only thing I could see, is that maybe like a Drake Mays jumps over Jayden Daniels in terms of ranking. Maybe a Malik Neighbors jumps over Marvin Harrison Jr. in terms of where he's going to get picked. You know, like, maybe there is going to be some sort of jump, or some sort of what's the word, like, I'm looking for? There's going to be some sort of tape that these owners see and be like, you know what? Compared to his college tape, he looks better than Marvin Harrison Jr. Compared to his college tape, Drake Mays or Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. looks a little bit better than Jayden Daniels. Not all Heisman winners go on to the NFL and have great success, right? Like, This isn't. It's not necessarily a lateral type of movement from winning the Heisman and having success in the NFL. But again, if you're Caleb Williams, you're already getting shit talked about you, and yet you're still being talked about being the number 1 overall pick. Why? Why do the combine? Again, there is a slight negative in that you have some other quarterbacks that may look just a little bit better than you compared to your college tape. Fuck it. Why? Who cares? I'm projected to be number 1, and I'm projected to be the best college quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. You know what I mean? Like that. Like you're already projected like that.
He's not projected to be better than
I'm saying
Joe
he's
Burrow
been the best
or
ones.
Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was.
Trevor Lawrence doesn't have great numbers. Let's just say, I mean, let's be real. He doesn't have great. I think him and Justin Fields have very similar numbers.
No, I'm talking about prospects. Like the highest prospects ever recorded.
Sure, but nobody expected Joe Burrow to be as good as Joe Burrow is.
Well, just look at the quarterbacks that worked out last year. I mean, is it a coincidence that like CJ Stroud threw at the combine and CJ Stroud lit it up and everyone was like, oh man, this dude is legit. Mm-hmm. And yet Bryce Young didn't want to throw at the combine and still went number 1 overall.
That's what I'm saying, dude.
That's what I'm saying too. I'm saying Bryce Young didn't want to throw because he was afraid that he was going to go show people who he really was. Mm-hmm. So he decided not to throw and let himself get drafted based on hype. And I'm saying as an owner, you don't want that. You want to know what you're getting. Anthony Richardson worked out at the combine. CJ Stroud did. Bryce Young didn't. And it's very clear
why been 1 year.
CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson would want to throw at the combine and why Bryce Young didn't want to throw at the combine. I mean, I don't think you have to be a genius to figure it out.
Right,
I mean,
but he was still picked number 1 overall, and he still got the most money out of all these guys. Like, I'm not saying that Bryce Young, maybe Bryce Young wants to do this just for the money.
From an owner perspective, like, do I want to see the players that I'm drafting work out? Absolutely. If you're just talking about like what's in the best interest of the player, then yeah, I get not working out 100%. But I wouldn't look at it through that lens because I would rather talk about like how the draft process goes from the teams looking at the player, not the player looking at team. Like I already know why players decide not to work out. And I also understand that they don't have to work out. I'm just saying if I was a general manager, these are things that I would consider somewhat red flags, and history kind of backs it up a little bit.
So like maybe recent history, but is Trevor Lawrence going to be that great if he's been to the playoffs once, won 1 playoff game and has had similar numbers to a Justin Fields type of guy who has not made the playoffs?
Yes, Trevor Lawrence will win probably 2 Super Bowls.
All hype. Nothing is proved. Nothing that Trevor Lawrence has done is proven that he will go that same route. Look at CJ Stroud.
How is it hype?
I would bet on CJ Stroud.
7-0 came back and won the game.
And I would bet on CJ Stroud
almost beat the Chiefs
over Trevor Lawrence to win a Super Bowl. I would bet on CJ Stroud to win Super Bowl over Trevor Lawrence at this point.
But how is that? What does that have to do with if Trevor Lawrence is going to pan out or not? CJ Stroud is his own person.
But what I'm saying is you're talking about how history has proven that if you don't work out at the combine and you're a first overall pick, that you aren't going to work out, right?
No, this isn't a mystery. I'm saying it proves that you are worried that you're going to lower your stock if you showcase your talents. That's all I'm saying, and which is what's happening. And
you're talking about from an owner's here. I was going to say, you're talking from an owner GM perspective, right? Like if I don't see my guy working out at the combine with people with wide receivers, for example, that you don't necessarily have a connection with, if you're an owner and you see that, hey, maybe he's not throwing it to these guys correctly, or he's throwing it up ahead of them, behind them, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake May, they don't know these wide receivers. These wide receivers out here are trying to make the same impact that these quarterbacks are doing. So if you're seeing that as an owner, doesn't that automatically bring your value down for a quarterback? Because there isn't necessarily a connection there between quarterback and wide receiver when you're drafting a guy who throughout an offseason has to make these connections with these guys that you are fully expecting to make a connection, but you're going to base them off a throwing session with some randos.
I think there's grace there. And I think everybody involved understands that. They're professionals. They've been doing this for a very long time. I think if you and I can figure out that they're not going to have the same connections with random players, I think they understand it too. But at the end of the day, the number one question you want answered when you draft anybody in any position is, do they love football? Do they love ball? Is it that they love ball or that they're just really good at ball? Because like, this is kind of full circle moment, but like we talked about, you can just be really good at something for a long time, but if you don't love it, there is an expiration date.
Going to the combine doesn't show an owner that you love football.
It shows that you love ball.
No, it does not.
100% it does.
No, it does not. Kobe's work ethic, Tom Brady's work ethic shows you love football. Shows that you, yeah, absolutely. The Mamba mentality. Jordan, Tom Brady, the work ethic you put into it shows that you love football.
Those guys all went to the combine.
Well, sure. But I mean, what I'm saying is, going to the combine, one singular event, does not prove that you love football. Going to win the Heisman, you could say that means you love football because you worked your ass off in college to win the most prestigious college award.
Everything is during this process, and you could just watch the Johnny Manziel documentary on Netflix, and they touch on this subject really in detail about how in this next 4 months, every decision that you make is under tremendous scrutiny, and it's all put under a microscope, and things will come out from your past or a tweet that you did. That is the purpose of these next 4 months, because it's literally teams that are saying, hey, before we give this guy millions and millions of dollars, we need to make sure that we're not missing anything. And I'm not saying that this is the all be all. I said that in my opening statement. I said, no, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't draft somebody that didn't throw at the combine. All I'm saying is that it's a point in the wrong direction for an owner and somebody that is trying to draft you. But it doesn't ultimately matter for the player. So they don't, I feel like we're talking in circles because I fully understand what you're saying, but I think I don't see what we actually don't agree on here.
Well, I think what I'm just trying to I guess understand is that, like, you're saying I want a guy who ultimately loves football, right? Caleb Williams, for example, won the Heisman, cried after a game. Does that not show the emotion, the love for football that you have? Because he doesn't want to throw at the combine. Now you're saying from a GM owner's perspective, I don't like my guy that does that, but he's crying over here on his mom's lap or on her shoulder after losing a football game. There's been plenty of people that talk shit about him crying and wearing the dress and whatever the fuck he was doing. But if you're looking at everything, you're looking at that game and you're like, there's the emotion, but he's not throwing at the combine. So I don't know, man. That's kind of lame. Like, what? No, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Say it like that. It feels like you intentionally minimize what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that because he cried at the combine or because he cried during the game, but he doesn't want to throw, that he doesn't love football. That's dumb. And it sounds dumb when you say it like that. I'm saying that it's a point in a multi-factor equation. It's 1 point in the opposite direction, nothing more, nothing less. Just like him crying is 1 point in the right direction. That's it. And there's going to be many, many points on both sides that are going to be equated in the next 4 months. But you asked me if I think it's if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And if you have to choose between those, I'm going to say it's a bad thing.
Okay, I get that, but you're wrong. So like, that's part of this conversation is like, we've had this conversation before when we talked about probably Bryce Young or even like quarterbacks, maybe the offseason prior, where we both disagree. And we're going to probably continue to disagree until we see a pattern of like, hey, he didn't throw at the combine, or a part of him not throwing at the combine, which, like you said, is part of an equation that goes into something fuller. These guys who didn't throw at the combine seem to be doing worse in a however long year period than guys who do throw at the combine, plus all these other factors. I just think personally, like, if you're Caleb Williams and you've already got the hype by tons of analysts that you are a once in a generation type of player and one of the best prospects coming out of college since Andrew Luck, like, why not bank on that, on all your hard work that you've done in college to get to this point, to get people talking about you like this? Why do you need to throw at the combine if you've already shown all the hard work and people are talking about you in this sort of like sense, right? Like this guy is the next fucking whatever. So I guess that's just kind of my point. But you're saying,
no, you're right. Like, there are good quarterbacks that refuse to throw at the combine. It's not a one size fits all. But there are, especially, I guess, my relationship with this kind of stuff reminds me of high school, because when my brother was going through a lot of this, like, we flew up to Vanderbilt for these events, and we drove down to South Florida for whatever school is in FIU, and then we went to Alabama for another like D2 school. So it's just like a lot of like, being in these positions requires a lot of people to do a lot of work. And yeah, if you're such a great person or not person, but athlete, that you don't have to showcase anything because you feel like everyone already knows who you are, then I guess that's fine. But there is something that tends to be, I guess, appeasing about seeing a highly recruited player out there throwing. That just for me, it feels good to see, because it's like, the more eyes on me, the more reps that I take, we're only going to the moon. It's like a stock. It's like Bitcoin, it's like, it doesn't matter who knows about it. It doesn't matter if I go out here and throw the ball. I'll convince you, if you don't think I'm good, you will be by the end of this throwing session. But you're right. Like, I guess if it were me risking millions of dollars, like, there's probably a great chance I would be like, you know what? No, like, the money's already there. Let's just secure the bag. And then if we suck, we suck. But at least we got at least we got something out of it.
At least you secured the bag, baby. And then, you know what's funny? We both know a guy in the Navy, Zion, who went and was trying out for Alabama. He was trying out as a walk-on. I mean, under Saban. So he said that there was tons of people there, and he was going for linebacker, I believe. There's tons of people there, and he's like, we got through the preliminary stuff, and then a bunch of people just left. And I was like, because I was confused. I was like, aren't those guys trying to go to Alabama or trying to go to like these SEC schools, like these big schools? And he's like, yeah, but that's all they needed to do. And I'm like, but why did you stay throughout the whole thing? And he's like, because I'm nowhere near their level. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I guess I understand that. If all you need to do is just one certain section of it, because you're talented and maybe you want to just show out in that specific sequence of the training camp or whatever, I guess that's just their prerogative,
Yeah. And I think too, like, Caleb Williams, like, with his off the cusp throwing style, like, I just think it's so unfair that people pick Patrick Mahomes to be like, oh yeah, he's going to be like Patrick Mahomes. It's like, no, he's not. He's not going to be like Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes is the only person that will ever be like Patrick Mahomes. And this is something, it's like, who's his comparison? It's like, look, can the guy play and can he not? Like, yeah, do they have that one thing in common? Sure. But like, it's just like anything that Caleb Williams goes on to do in his professional career if he doesn't win 3 Super Bowls in his first 5 seasons, is
He's
going to
not Mahomes.
be, it didn't work out the way that we thought it was going to work out. And it's like LeBron James had the most hype since Michael Jordan, and LeBron panned out, right? Like LeBron is still doing amazing things, but that, like, I just didn't feel I didn't feel the same way about Caleb Williams in college. It's not like he was like doing things that you just never seen before. And yet you're comparing him to the Michael Jordan of our NFL. You know, it seems like a recipe for disaster, especially, and I'm not saying the crying is a bad thing, but when you're that emotional, you can tell that he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and a great quarterback has to kind of not do that at all times. As messed up as it sounds, like there's a time to do that. And after the game is the right place to do that. But it does make me wonder if the spotlight, he made that comment about, I just wanted to go home and cuddle with my dog. Look, I've wanted to do that, and I'm not judging that. My question is only if he has the mental toughness for the NFL. And that's a valid question with a new generation of kids that are coming into the league, that are growing up differently.
Yeah.
And even these coaches have to change their style because fear doesn't work anymore. They're like, fear, triggered, like leaving. And it's like, no. We need you to stay. You're our best player. I thought if I screamed at you, you would work harder, but that's not the case. So, this is happening before our eyes. I think that is a really interesting kind of storyline, is that there's a new generation of players that are coming into the league, and it'll be interesting to see how the relationship between the coaches and the players go, and how the players career-wise play out. Have you thought about that at all?
You mean just the hype around them and how they play out? And are we trying to?
There's a new generation of there's Gen Z, there's millennials, and like there's a new generation coming into the league. So I haven't heard it being talked about, but it's interesting at the least.
I think whenever I feel like whenever there's talk of like, will this generation work out? I don't know, man. I think you just got to look at, quarterbacks from the 90s versus quarterbacks of the 2000s versus quarterback of the 2010s. Mahomes is thriving in this NFL. Tom Brady, if he were to be in the same class as Mahomes, knowing how good he was, I think he gets 10 Super Bowls, right? Like, let's be honest. If the rules were not only changed for Tom Brady, but they've been changed even more for your Mahomes, for your Josh Allens, for your Aaron Rodgers, for these guys, for those guys. When it comes to generations, if you're a football player, you're a football player. I don't think that necessarily what we see and what is kind of put on some sort of mainstream media about this generation's weak for this, and just this generation is not going to live up to the prior generation. I think it's all kind of bullshit, if I'm being honest. Like, if you're a football player,
to say they won't live up to it. That's not.
No,
that's
but what
not
I'm
saying.
But I also think, whether, because everybody judges everybody, no matter what. Like you said, you're going to compare Caleb Williams to Patrick Mahomes, and if he doesn't win 3 Super Bowls in his first 6 years, that it doesn't live up to it. Yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do, right? But again, just like you said, like, who cares if he wins 1 Super Bowl? And kind of what like Nick's saying, if Caleb Williams gets the Bears an NFC North championship, he's going to live up to those expectations. It's all about where he lands and how he does. I don't think like the hype can be bullshit, but also just saying things in terms of like, this generation is not as tough or is weaker than this generation. It's like, sure. That weighs as much on this generation's conscience as much as, the hype of some NFL quarterbacks. Doesn't matter until you see it play out in front of your eyes. At least in my mind, I'm just like, who cares? Because the NFL is going to be ever changing. In 10 years, it's going to be different. The rules are going to be different for the entire NFL than it was for Patrick Mahomes' rookie year, for example.
Well, I look at it less emotional in the way where I think about it, like if a new generation of players were coming into the league that have, let's say, let's say they all ate salmon and a bag of marshmallows every single night. And it's like, okay, well, now we're going to see like how eating marshmallows and salmon, pans out into this next step. Like, it's not like, no, they're weak and our generation's better and they're pussies. It's not that.
Mhm.
It's like, I'm saying this is a generation that grew up with these apps on our phones and the connection and relationship that human beings have to their cell phones
Mhm.
are completely different, and that there's everything in life is cause and effect. So like, even if you're doing something and you don't realize that there's an effect, there is an effect. That's why
Mhm.
psychologists love to study everything,
Mhm.
because everything, there's always more to it than just I did this. It's I did this and then what happened. That's the second part that people are trying to and I haven't heard any, besides the Caleb Williams crying thing. That was the only time I heard anything about like this generation's weak or anything like that.
Mhm.
I'm just making the case that this is a new generation. My sister just turned 22 years old. That is Caleb Williams's age. My little sister is the
Mhm.
same age as Caleb Williams, and she and I are very, very different. So even just in that age group, that it's a whole new generation. They grew up
Mhm.
completely different than us. It would almost be a disservice to act like it's not a different generation. They're proudly a different generation. The
Mhm.
question is, what, like, is this going to look different in the NFL, or is it going to be essentially unnoticeable? That's the only thing that I'm bringing up, because it is
No,
a different generation.
no, you're 100% correct because I think every generation has a noticeable change. It just does. Let's kind of go back to when Eli Manning refused to play for the Chargers. That was one of the first times that you saw that, and you're like, "Huh? You're a college football player. You're gonna get drafted, and you're gonna fucking team that you get drafted by. This fucker over here, just because his dad was in the NFL, is saying I'm not gonna play for this team. Okay, cool. Now let's go to Tom Brady. Last pick in the draft turns out to be a 7-time Super Bowl winner. It's a different way of going about it. It's a different generation. Then you go into let's fast forward to JJ McCarthy on Michigan. What does he do prior to every game? He takes his shoes off, he meditates, and he envisions himself, or at least I believe this is what I heard from watching the national championship. He envisions himself winning the national championship. Those things are going to be very obvious.
Manifesting.
Manifestations. Those things are going to be very obvious in the NFL. JJ McCarthy makes it as a starting quarterback on an NFL team, and prior to every game, he is manifesting, let's say his rookie year, manifesting on the field with his shoes off that he's going to be the starter of the team. He becomes the starter. Then he manifested he's going to win the division, and he wins the division. Then he manifested he's going to win the NFC title game, AFC title game, and then a Super Bowl. That is very apparent from things that Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers did. I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers going to a fucking hole for 2 weeks and doing ayahuasca and doing mushrooms. You did ayahuasca and you did mushrooms in the 90s? You're out of the fucking league, dude. You're doing weed and
Or
you're
they just didn't
suspended.
talk about it. They didn't
Exactly.
put it out on the Pat McAfee show.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. Like these new generations, to what you're saying, is it going to have an effect on the NFL? It's going to have definitely an effect on the NFL because you're going to see it and it's going to be talked about more often. Yes, absolutely it will be. But I just don't think that it necessarily has to be a negative thing. And I'm not saying that you are saying it's a negative thing. I'm just saying I don't think people should look at it in a negative way. It should just be like, hey, these guys are doing their own thing. This is a new generation and this is how they do it. Cool. Are they winning football games? Sick. As a 50-year-old man, that's all I care about. You know what I mean? That's literally all I care about.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.